What happens on Thursdays, boys and girls? Why, that's right. It's Dr. E. Christian Kopff. Smarter than the average dude. Mr. Trace, keener than most persons. You remember that, don't you, Chris? We'll talk about that. Dr. Chris Kopff from University of Colorado.
It's time for the Newsmaker Show on News Talk AM 1480 WLEA. Here's Kevin Torres.
Mr. Keen, Tracer of Lost Persons, was the radio show. I listened to it every Sunday night. He had a guy named Mike. The ending was always the same. The guy tried to get out of the room, and Mike tackled him. Remember that? Every week, you knew Mike was going to tackle a guy.
Right, you knew that because they had the sound effects set up for that, right?
Yeah. And so then Bob and Ray, those two geniuses from Boston, came up with Mr. Trace, keener than most persons. Oh, dear. Then they had those reporters out there, Wally Ballou. But it turns out Ballou was a kind of a common name in New England.
Oh, was it? So,
yeah.
So they used a common New England
name.
Yeah,
but
okay.
Wally Ballou, that's sort of... Those guys were great. God rest their souls.
They were very funny, and they depend on the fact that with radio, you learned to pace things because you were using your imagination.
Oh, yes.
And so they could pause, and they could, as Jack Benny could, these pauses. Where now on TV, everything has to be moving at a furious pace. You can't stop for anything.
Well, I don't watch any of those sitcoms because they're silly. And the audience laughter is fake, and radio was real.
We're not laughing. We're weeping.
We run the old-time radio show Saturday mornings 11 till noon. We have the Lone Ranger, Dragnet, Gildersleeve, our Miss Brooks.
Even better because a lot of them were kids' shows and were played just when you were trying to get the kids calmed down for dinner. You turn on the radio and we'd sit around and listen to the Lone Ranger and Sergeant Preston and people like that.
Yeah, they were great. And I have purchased lots of that for our grandchildren because it's wonderful for their imagination. Yeah.
Yes, because you have to imagine stuff. You don't just see it. You are part of the performance because you're imagining what the Yukon King is doing and how the Lone Ranger is reacting and all the rest of it. It's not just handed to you. And it's it makes teaching harder because kids come in expecting to be entertained, expecting to sit back and let the teacher entertain them instead of actively participating in their education.
I've talked to teachers who tell me that that's the result of Sesame Street. You can't hold their attention more than a few seconds, and it's got to be entertaining. Is that true?
That's absolutely right. Sesame Street was an academic disaster. It was set up, of course, for very young kids who do have short attention spans. But one of the things that schools used to be able to do, is to slowly get the kids' attention spans longer and longer so they can get ready for life. And I once heard a principal of an elementary school describe her school assembly as this enormous bug in which the legs are moving furiously all the time, and then it moves slower and slower until it gets to the 6th grade, and then they're just moving at a normal pace. Because, little kids do need to get this constant change, but you need to teach older kids to take their time, to pay attention. My younger son was somebody who could pay attention from a very early age, and one of his early teachers, I think 2nd grade, said she thought he was sneaky. And we said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, he's always looking at me. It's called paying attention.
Yeah.
As a 2nd grade teacher, she wasn't used to that. But Sesame Street had everybody in this constant, furious pace. And, of course, when you teach things like letters of the alphabet and sounds, maybe you can do that. But then math and grammar, you need to take your time.
Well, I always thought it was cute for the kids, but I was still teaching when Sesame came on, and I could see the effect. The kids had to be entertained. Now, listen.
It had a terrible effect, and they're so proud of it. And, of course, part of the problem is, as you know, it's a big money maker. Because all these little toys and gadgets and spin-offs make a lot of money.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's what it's all about, is making money.
Ultimately, that's why they have to keep it. We can't say, look, we need something that really causes kids' attention spans to increase, makes them concentrate. No, they'll lose money.
Chris Kopff is my guest, and I want to correct something that may have been misunderstood on one of my other shows. I have a show at 9:35 Tuesday Wednesday, Thursday, maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Depends on the week. It's called a coffee break, and it's not an interview show. It's just kind of a relaxed little mid-morning break in which I literally drink a cup of coffee, sometimes two. And the other day, I made a comment about the school board some years ago. It was not made up of teachers, relatives, in some cases teachers from other districts. It was made up of civic leaders. And by that, I meant local people who had succeeded in some cases, maybe a veterinarian, maybe a doctor. Trying to think, a professor from a nearby university, but they didn't have any direct interest in the local school, financial or otherwise, right? And I bemoaned the fact that the teachers' unions, I don't know if this is true in Colorado, but in New York, they've made a concerted effort to take over the school boards. Now, are they doing a better job or a worse job than the other people? I have no way of knowing. But that was misinterpreted by a member of the school board, whose name will remain anonymous for now. A very friendly conversation. He called me up and said, "You're attacking the teachers." I said, No. I think to be a teacher in today's schools takes a lot, because there is really no discipline from the state of New York. They pretty much abolished what a teacher can do. And I've heard of teachers being, badly insulted, sometimes even assaulted in local districts. So I have nothing but the highest respect for the teachers. And I don't care how much money they make. I really don't. Everyone wants to make more money. I'm not opposed to that. I do think that teachers' unions controlling the school board is not a good idea. How about you?
No, it's exactly right. There needs to be some outside input into what's going on. And we don't want the school boards micromanaging every detail of the school, but there needs to be someone who's outside looking in and reminding you of what needs to be done. And the problem is the people who choose to become leaders of a union tend, by that very decision, to move away from teaching, to move away from the day-to-day challenges that are being faced by teachers.
I think in the bigger cities, cities, that's true.
I'm one of the few college-level people that goes into schools, but there are a few others. And we always come out in shell shock.
Yeah.
Because the difference, we just come out just, thanking God that we walk into a class, there's no discipline problem. Our kids can, do basic stuff. We have to still correct a lot of grammar and things, but, we are able to do what is traditionally known as teaching. Mm-hmm. And a good deal of what a teacher does now is the disciplinary stuff, is obeying the rules, is having to hand in these course outlines so the principal can check them out, on and on and on and on, in ways that really are very demanding and are not teaching. They take away from the time devoted to actually teaching. But the teachers' union and the teachers' board are different. Unions should be protected, making sure that the rules are enforced and the teachers aren't being, misused. And the board should be outside people who look in and, you have the discipline of explaining what you're doing to an outside person. And that's a terrific discipline, because then you can often see, they often have questions that, I hadn't thought about that. When the same group is running everything, then you have the problem, which we now have in D.C. also, and in Albany and in Denver, where you live in your own bubble and you've protected yourself from the outside. Mm-hmm. And it isn't that you think you're doing a great job. And then you only notice it when there's an explosion. And there doesn't need to be explosions. Right now in Colorado, 11 of our northern counties had a vote on seceding from the state. It's considered a great victory because 6 out of 11 voted not to secede, which also means 5 of 11 voted to succeed. And there's just a lot of unhappiness, and the people in Denver can't figure out why, because they're doing such a great job, and they never talk to anybody but people who agree with them. And that's what happens when one group, and it can be the union, it can be another group, it can be businessmen, take over something and don't talk to anybody else, don't hear anybody else, and then they only hear something when there's an explosion. And that's not a good situation. We should be avoiding explosions and confrontations.
I heard a commentator on TV, Britt Hume. I think Britt Hume is one of the better ones. He's
absolutely near the top of the list.
Been there a long time, seen corruption on both sides, seen the good, seen the ugly. And he said once they get in that White House, it's a bubble. Yep. They're all talking to each other. They kind of forget what they're doing. They forget that the people are out there, that they know absolutely. Best.
And they know what's best.
Yeah, they know what's best.
They know what's best. And they only invite people in who already agree with them. They don't listen. You know, but there isn't anything special when I say this about the president. It's true of our governor and your governor, and et cetera. When they hear somebody, they sort of get bored because they already know this can't be right. Mm-hmm. And that's because they don't get the impact of listening to different perspectives and different voices. Yeah. And that's why when our congressmen go back now, they hate having these town meetings because you hear all these people contradicting you.
One of the best.
Instead of being happy you're being contradicted and saying, listen, I need to listen to you. Say that over again. I'm going to try to repeat what you're saying to see if I'm representing you correctly. That's the most important thing you can do, whether you're a scholar trying to understand a scholarly problem or a politician trying to understand a social problem.
Who is the former senator? Well, he's deceased now. He switched from Democrat to Republican and then Republican back to Democrat, and he lost as a Democrat. He had cancer, fought cancer very valiantly. Arlen Specter. Right. I saw a wonderful comment at one of his town meetings, in which, of course, he knew better, and these other slobs, what do they know, right?
Right.
And he finally said to this fellow, looked like a construction worker to me, or a retired construction worker, maybe a plumber, I don't know what he was. He said, well, what do you want? And this is Specter speaking, and the guy says, I want you to leave us alone. And Specter couldn't say anything. And isn't that what America is supposed to be about? Leave us alone. We'll take a break. I'll be back with Dr. E. Christian Kopff. We'll talk a little bit about Common Core and about the counties that want to secede. That's going on all over the country, by the way, not just Colorado.
Didn't know that.
Yep. We'll be back in a moment.
Hep Sales in North Main Lumber has your hot water tip of the day.
Don't pay to heat water you're not using.
Right now, Hep Sales has Richmond natural gas tankless water heaters on sale. By heating water only when you need it, these Energy Star certified tankless water heaters can help families of all sizes save money on gas bills every year. Richmond tankless natural gas water heaters use less energy and still deliver the performance you want. Buy now, save $300 or more on select models. Don't heat tomorrow's water today. Get to Hep Sales in North Main Lumber and start saving. All the details are at hepsales.com.
E. Christian Kopff, professor of all kinds of stuff at University of Colorado, in Boulder, our regular Thursday guest. You mentioned before we went on the air that the teachers' unions in Colorado were disappointed by a vote. What was that all about?
There was an amendment to the Constitution, as we love to vote for in Colorado, not just bills, but amendments, which would have basically raised taxes by $1 billion. And they promised it was all going to go directly to the schools and teaching and teachers and on and on. But, of course, as all these promises, it was basically going to go to sources that the teachers' union had control over. And, of course, if we thought this money was going to individual teachers to improve their classes, it would have been different. Although it can't be said this is a great time in the state's economy to raise taxes by $1 billion. It was massively defeated, like 66 to 34%.
What about Common Core?
Pro-education state, so that's very striking.
What about Common Core curriculum? How's that going down in Colorado?
It is not the controversy here that it is elsewhere, partly for a number of reasons, but we haven't heard the really lively discussion. Partly is that a number of our best schools are either charters, or they're international baccalaureate, or there's something else that, protects them from being interfered with by Common Core. And the people in the less good schools, I hate to say they don't care, but they don't seem to. So the kind of revolt we've seen in places like North Carolina, New York, a few other places.
New York. Mm-hmm. Amazingly New York, yeah.
Yeah. No, the people in New York care about education, and they're concerned. They tend to get, I think, But you guys there have said some very good things. And I will say there has been good discussion among knowledgeable people here. But there hasn't been a big storm about it, largely because the best schools, at this stage, they're buffered. If you look at our really best schools, there's always something about them that they're not just a regular public school. As I say, they're chartered, they're International Baccalaureate, they have a very strong special program set up so that they can opt out of various aspects of Common Core. Now,
Good.
That's going to affect all the other.
Good. Well,
also, the problem is the Democrats have such a majority in the two houses. There isn't much of a debate going on in the two houses of the legislature.
well, there's going to be one here. Even the Democrats are getting stirred up because their teachers' unions, to their great credit, are opposing Common Core, and they have a lot of control over the legislature, both parties, but particularly the Democrats. Now, I was quite
very heavy on loads of tests.
Yeah.
And teachers' unions feel that the teachers are being tested out.
Well, boy, I'll tell you, I've done several shows on Common Core. It's scary. It's scary.
Yep.
And there's a meeting tonight at the Alfred Village Hall. Dr. Mark Garrison of the University of Duval College, in Buffalo. I had him on the air the other day. Very bright guy, sociologist, and he's been studying Common Core, and he's got a lot of interesting things to say. But here is what really ticked me off the other day, and I want to, as we say in liberal circles, share this with you. He told me, Mark Garrison told me, what day was that? That was Tuesday, I think, maybe Monday. No, Tuesday. He said to me that teachers are being threatened by the administrators in some of the schools that they cannot say anything negative about Common Core. Boy, that ticked me off. That really made me angry. Well, that very night, or maybe it was the night before, it doesn't matter, almost simultaneously, the superintendent of Alfred Elman Central, one of the finest schools in the state, came out publicly against Common Core, so his teachers aren't afraid to speak out. Now other teachers are speaking out, and I say hooray for the teachers, because this isn't just a teacher-pupil problem. This is a parent national problem. If they get away with this, this infiltration of the schools, it's going to be disastrous.
And the interesting thing is it's a national program. They're doing it state by state. So every time you complain about the national element, they say, no, it's state by state. Don't you see? No, it's true. They are putting it in state by state. But this thing comes out of the Department of Education and comes out of a relatively small group of people who've labeled themselves educational reformers. But the question is it a positive reform? Is it reform for good, or is it just monkeying around with the old Deweyite ideas, which have not worked and are not going to work?
Well, you speak a lot of truth, but the one thing you haven't done today is make me laugh like you did last week when you said, Scripture should have put it, the rich you have always with you. What can you do this week to top it off?
I don't know that I could match that. That was one of my more inspired moments, perhaps since I was quoting. I was not quoting, but I was quoting the verse that should have been in the Bible. That's always it's hard to come up with a verse that the Bible left out very often. So.
I loved it, though. I used that all week long. The rich you have always with you. Do what you want, Obama. The rich are always going to be there. Yeah. Huh? What's that?
You see that in our political system, too, of course.
Oh, yeah. I wish we had term limits. That would mean that the bureaucrats run the Congress, but it's better than... You know what really bothers me about these guys that go to Congress and the Senate? Because when we say Congress, we usually mean the House of Representatives. Actually, Congress is both of them.
Absolutely right.
They go there, then they get a job as a lobbyist. So what were they really doing when they were in there? For whom were they really working? What job were they angling for? It should be illegal for those guys to become lobbyists and those women. And it should be mandatory that they get out of Washington when they're finished. What do you think?
Yes. I mean, the problem here is we now have more lobbyists than we have Congress people, of course. Yeah. And this enormous amount of lobbying, I mean, it's arguable that this is the true government of the United States, are these lobbyists. They're the ones who write the bills. They're the ones who argue for them, and the congressmen sit there rubber stamping things that are given them by one group of lobbyists or another. So it's really turned out, the lobbying business, and the congressmen themselves. Congress has become the minor leagues before you're called up to be a lobbyist, just like a baseball player. Play in the minor leagues to learn how to hit a curveball.
Now you have said the funny thing. Congress is the minor leagues for the lobbyist class. Right. You've got it. That's it for now. Thanks, Chris. Talk to you next week, please, God.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
All right.